Hey everyone, and welcome to a very special preview of an upcoming Codemasters release. It's the return of Grid in capital letters, and we actually had the chance to preview the game ahead of launch on Xbox One X and PlayStation 4 Pro, the enhanced consoles. And the man in the room on the game, both versions, Tom Morgan, joins me now. Hello.
Hello, how's it going? So yeah, this is the big reboot. Well, we've seen an awful lot of Codemasters this year. They've had Dirt Rally 2 and Formula 1 2019, both running on that Ego engine of theirs, and I was invited over to a preview event to get kind of an early take ahead of that October launch. Not too long to wait, but we've got like an early hands-on with the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro versions. And yeah, the outlook is really good so far.
So let's talk about the basics here before we go on to the technical specifics. Back in the day, there was TOCA touring cars, and Grid was kind of like the more arcadey style offshoot of that original franchise. It's obviously the first Grid title that we've seen on the current generation. So what's the deal? What's it all about?
Well, obviously they're using the Ego engine, and the engine inherits a lot of the stuff that we saw in Formula 1 2019. It's also focusing big time on the physics side, so car deformation is something that the Codemasters team highlighted to me as I was playing it, and it seems to go the extra mile to show these very intricate creases on the cars, and that ties into the gameplay as well. Now, the experience is a lot more arcadey in nature when it comes to drifting around corners, and also the fact that you can be in a race and you can kind of knock into another car, and if you do it multiple times, that car will build up a bit of a grudge against you and have a nemesis tag attached to them. From that point onwards, they start trying to knock you out as well. So the physics part ties in there.
But it is like an arcade-style experience then, because if you look at like Dirt Rally, it's a kind of fusion, I guess, between simulation and arcade, and this is more of an all-out arcade-style experience. So let's talk about the technical nuts and bolts of the two versions that we saw, which was indeed PS4 Pro, Xbox One X. Interesting one with Ego, isn't it? Because it seems like the developers have tried pretty much every type of upscaling technique over the years. We've had checkerboard rendering in F1, we had dynamic resolution scaling in Dirt Rally 2, I believe. But what's the situation on this version of Grid? It isn't finished, is it? There's still some work to be done.
Yeah, I think we've got to qualify that, don't we? It is a month off release, and so things can change. But as far as I see it at the event, they've gone for two set resolutions on the two enhanced consoles. Maybe dynamic resolution, and I've completely missed it, but from so many frames that I've tested, it was consistently these numbers, which is PS4 Pro is running at 2560 by 1440, and Xbox One X goes for 3072 by 1728, which is about 80% of a full 4K on each axis.
So that is, by my maths, an extra 44% of resolution, raw resolution on the Xbox One X. So how does it shape up in, eye-to-eye comparisons there? Does that resolution actually make a difference?
It does. Overall, I could tell right away, moving from one to the other, that actually X is sharper. They seem to use the same anti-aliasing method, so that isn't really a distinguishing point, but yeah, that did count for something. And I'm glad you did the maths on that one. I hadn't had time. When you put the number to it, it does make a lot of sense. You are getting your money's worth for all those extra pixels. One thing that did surprise me, though, is the graphics comparison stuff besides the resolution. There's a couple of settings either side which separate the two.
Yeah, and what we got there then?
I noticed better anisotropic filtering on PS4 Pro. So, like the track markings down the center of a road will look clearer further into the distance on PS4 Pro, so there's like an obvious filtering line, a kind of halo effect past the point where the filtering stops or degrades, let's say, the cascade, and so you'll see that line thicken further afield on PS4 Pro, whereas on X it's much closer to the camera where that line thickens and you can see the filtering kicks in. So it was just an odd quirk, and I thought, well, you can see it on PS4 Pro despite the fact you can't see quite as clearly into the distance owing to the resolution difference. That is a factor, nothing major, one of those classic nitpick points. One of the bigger things that I did notice was that the grass setting is entirely different between the two. X actually has grass for a start on the Brands Hatch circuit. So all the way through that track, there's actual grass on the sides of the track, and it's completely, seemingly, stripped out on PS4 Pro. So very curious. Who knows if that'll be the case for the final release, but that's how it stood for this press build. We've seen it in the last few Ego Engine titles we've seen this year. Shadows matching reflections, matching resolution, all the rest of it, even geometry pop in, which is practically invisible anyway. There's basically no way to distinguish the two. So they've done really well in making them on par with each other. So really, I think the way the X GPU has been taxed is with that higher resolution.
The reason I did that calculation is because the performance side of things is kind of curious, isn't it?
I noticed it at the event while playing it rather than, after the fact when we scan it through the tools we've got, which is, a bit more important, I think. So on X, it's worth qualifying. We do have generally 60 FPS performance on most of the tracks, typical circuits, Brands Hatch being one of them, where there's not much in terms of detail on the size of the track, not many spectators, and the action really is focused on the cars in the center. In that case, fine, 60 FPS. And there's an adaptive VSync which triggers a bit of tearing in the top third, but actually you're not going to see it very often, especially because it's mostly cloud. Now, I had access to every track and event thanks to this press build, so I could really dip into anything. I just kind of stuck with the first few and then jumped ahead to some of the more advanced ones with the more souped up vehicles. In the end, what really did it, what really tumbled it, was the San Fran race through the city, and like the congestion of all the cars and the tall buildings and the spectators on the sides made it visibly drop to around 50 FPS, even 45 nearly. Coupled with the tearing, that did kind of stick out. I think it's just purely because of those cars congesting down one narrow street that did it. If this was using a dynamic resolution setup, it would have kicked in here, but this is where I got my readings for 1728p. That is the case where it will drop, but mostly 60 FPS in most of the other stages. It does make me wonder how it would have run if there was, say, a lower resolution mode, or even, if you could force X to just push out a native 1080p through the system menu, as is possible with PS4 Pro.
Well, that all depends on whether the PS4 Pro 1080p mode is actually native 1080p as opposed to just downscaling the higher. I think the thing here is, though, well, two things. First of all, the Ego engine does support DRS, dynamic resolution scaling, so kind of hope that it is active in the final build, simply because I don't think we should be trading resolution for drops to 45 frames per second in a racing game. It stood out to you when you were playing at the event. We don't need frame rate tools to see it, so that is a bit of a concern from my perspective. And secondly, there was a Ego game that went straight to 1080p on the X. You could force a 1080p mode, is that right? I mean, why not force it to 1440p, the same as the Pro? We've already demonstrated that the Pro is really strong at 1440p, so the X should be even better. So maybe a quality or performance mode, or DRS. Seems to be lots of potential options here, especially when the Pro is, seemingly significantly smoother in those trouble spots.
Let's move over to the Pro, I guess, because, it does provably do a better job of it. I ran it through the same San Fran track, and it turned out mostly 60 FPS. There are some bit of tearing at the top, but actually it's very forgivable. There was one weird moment in another track entirely, just drops randomly to 45 FPS, the low 50s. That's all just because everything kind of crashes, all the cars kind of congest in one spot, and then it's fine again almost immediately. So hopefully not a sign of things to come, because on balance the other races had zero problem on Pro and it all just ran really well. But I didn't get a chance to test if there was a kind of 1080p support mode by forcing it through the system. There's definitely nothing in the menus of the game on either side, which would have been good because we actually had that mode on Dirt Rally 2 on Xbox One X. It was only on X. It was called 4K mode. When it was off, you just got a straight 1080p, which was perfect for people really looking for the best performance. So that's really what we need at the very least.
I guess we'll see when the final game comes out, but the engine has the technology. We've seen various options in different versions of Ego games to get this locked to 60 or very close to it. And I guess, as you say, it is just select levels that are causing issues at the moment, so maybe there's an optimization push still to come. Again, we got to stress that this is not final code, but we are pretty close to release now. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the final game, and this initial look is promising. Obviously some work to do, but well, we'll leave it to Codemasters. Fingers crossed everything will work out just fine.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this one up then. So that is a preview of the new grid from Codemasters, PS4 Pro, Xbox One X. We'll be taking a look at all of the versions of the game once we have final code. But that's all from us for now. Please do like and subscribe to support the work we do here at Digital Foundry. Ring the bell for instant notifications whenever a new video is published on the channel. And, well, yeah, follow us on Twitter if you'd like to talk more about this game. But that's all from us for now. Thanks for watching.